everybody. This is Adrian Campos with The Future of Data is AI. And I wanted to come with you today to present or to show a great feature that I found in one of IBM's new products from watsonx.ai. And that's how to create synthetic data. You know, several times when we're working with enterprise clients, we need to use their data for proof of concepts, proof or MVPs, right? And many times the client does not want to share data with us. They just don't for any reason they can't, or sometimes they can't by law, right? So it's proprietary stuff they can. Sometimes we need to work within their own environment. Sometimes we need to work within their environment and use their data. And unfortunately, they have to use their own people or resources to do their own proof of concepts or minimum viable products. And many times that's not possible as we're proving out the technology from IBM to the client. So this new feature allows really anyone, whether you could be a resident, a citizen data scientist or a seasoned data scientist, to create synthetic data to mimic the data that you may have in a data set. So I'm going to be presenting to you today on how to go about doing this. So let's go ahead and start. Let me switch over to the presentation. All right. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is log on to your cloud.ibm.com account. So you'll be going to cloud.ibm.com. If you don't have an IBM ID, simply create one. If you do, go ahead and enter yours. I have mine here. Let's see if it'll allow me to access mine. Okay. So here we have the cloud.ibm.com dashboard. This is the first thing we see when we log in. There's various services that you could go ahead and spin up on the IBM cloud, just like you can on the AWS platform or also on the Google platform. But on the left-hand side, you're going to be clicking on the plus icon to expand the global navigation. Down on the left-hand side, there's two areas where we could work with our data. You all may be familiar with other presentations or demos that I've done with Cloud Pak for Data, but today we're going to go into Watson X. So go ahead and click on Watson X. If your instance is not spinned up, we're going to be asked to go ahead and start it up. So let's go ahead and launch here right in the middle. Click launch. And now we're here at our dashboard for watsonx.ai. There's a few things that we're going to be looking over here just briefly at a high level. Of course, you could go ahead and customize your dashboard here if you like. But on the right-hand side, I'm going to be opening this in a sandbox. If you notice here, there's one that has been pre-made for me, Adrian's Sandbox. However, you may be asked if this is your first time to create a sandbox. Create one, name it whatever you like. Once you do that, it'll bring you back to this screen. So on this screen, we could do a few things here. We could actually play around in the prompt lab. If you are familiar with generative AI and prompting and prompting services such as ChatGPT, this is very similar. You could use different models also, not just actually one like ChatGPT does. We could also build. Oh, let me increase here. Oops. 1 second, everybody. Okay, so I could go ahead and look at what I'm doing. All right, so we could experiment with our foundation models by using our prompt lab here. We could also build machine learning models with Auto AI, which is a really cool feature. If you want to test out a model, you have some data you want to predict, you want to classify, you could go ahead and test it out by allowing the IBM platform to actually to choose the best algorithm for your analysis. You could also work online and collaborate with other colleagues with Python or R in the notebooks there. You could also prepare and visualize data. But what we're going to be doing, we're going to be actually working inside the project, which you don't see it natively here as one of the choices. You do have to create a project first, which I've created. Now on the right-hand side here, So, as I mentioned before, there's a dashboard here, there's a few things. However, we're going to create a project. Now, earlier today, I logged in and it created a project for me called Adrian's Sandbox. So, you should have something similar. If you renamed it, you could go ahead and rename it. But here, we're going to go into my project. Okay, we're going to go into my project. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to delete this because I'm going to show us how to upload a file. All right. So you should have actually a blank slate, just like this. There's nothing in here. There's nothing to jump back into. There's a README. There's no README documentation. If you're familiar with Markdown files, you could create a README.md file. I think it's Markdown that you could go ahead and upload here and actually collaborate with your colleagues if you're putting this in and sharing this with your GitHub account. There's zero assets over here. You could tell there's nothing there. Also, there's times when we need to create a perhaps a weekly or a daily run of a notebook of a report. And this is where we would create them, but we're not going to be touching on that. Also, you could manage here by actually, managing resources, who has access control to it, environments. There's a bunch of environments here that we could go ahead and utilize, right? You could even create your own. Of course, there's resources here that we could go ahead and look at what we're consuming here. I've done some synthetic data testing before, so you can see what I've done. Also, there's some service integrations. Right now, we have this account integrated with Watson machine learning. Okay. Now, we won't be going into that right now, but we will be going into our assets. So, we're going to be creating an asset. But first, what we need to do is upload some sample data. Now, this sample data can come in various forms, right? Most more easily is to upload a CSV file. So we're going to be uploading a CSV file. So I'm going to be importing here assets. All right, so we dropped in a heart file, heart.csv, and now we have one asset here. Now, let's go ahead and click on this and see what's going on with it, just to see what we're pulling in. As you can see here on the left-hand side, we're previewing the asset. Now, I could tell you right now that this is a heart asset that I pulled down from kaggle.com for a competition. I believe they had one several years ago on predicting heart disease. So we have different fields here, different features that we could go through: age, sex, chest pain if they had chest pain, max HR, exercise angina, old peak. I don't know most of these, but at the very end, you'll notice that we have heart disease 0 or 1. So do they have heart disease? No. Do they have heart disease? Yes, obviously. It's a binary classification there. So that's what we're going to be going through. Now, I am going to be going through these because it's kind of fun to see this. Now, we could profile the asset. If it's a very large asset, it sometimes takes a fairly long time to profile the asset, but it's worthwhile our effort to go ahead and let that asset be profiled. Now, data quality here, I'm going to click on visualization here that we could see and visualize the data. However, this will not populate unless, of course, our data first is profiled. As you can see, our data is still being profiled. And what this entails, we are looking at our data, seeing how much data we have. If you're familiar with exploratory data analysis, this is pretty much what we're doing here as we're profiling the data. Let's go to visualization. That's retrieving the data. So it needs to be profiled first. All right. So we'll go ahead and let this go through before, and then I'll come back here. So I won't take up too much of our time. But let's go ahead and preview our asset again. Now let's go into our sandbox here. Because what we're interested right now is actually creating additional data, synthetic data. So we're going to be clicking on new task here. And we're going to be generating synthetic tabular data. Give it a name. I always suggest to add a description. Is that 100,000? No, that is 100,000. Nope, that's 1 million. That's 100,000. I want 100,000 rows. Okay. We have a general default configuration that we're going to be using. We're going to be using two CPUs with 8 gigs of RAM for this. Now we're going to wait for our system to go ahead and spin up, or excuse me, our environment to spin up. While our environment spins up, you may be able to see here on the left-hand side a few different areas. Well, okay, we're done. So let's go ahead and work on our synthetic data generator here. Now, I'm actually going to go just to into first-time user. So you could go ahead and see what the potential of this is compared to an experienced user. It's not super difficult to jump into the experienced user. However, I recommend first time user, right? Let's continue. All right. So we could create our data set from a data schema. If you have your schema from your data, you could go ahead and drop it here. Excuse me, select this one. But we actually going to be using a data set. So we're going to leverage our existing data here. Next. No data set. So let's select a data from a project. We have one data set from our project, heart.csv. Okay, I believe it did some of our profiling already. We could go back to that, click on select. Okay, so lucky us, we can import less than 2.5 gigs of data. We probably uploaded maybe, let me see what this is, 36K. So we uploaded 36K of data. That's important because we're going to see how it changes a bit for us. Click on next. Now, anonymize is a great feature to have. We might be working with data where we need to anonymize the age or perhaps sex or zip code. So we could go ahead and select one. For example, let's anonymize their sex. So we're going to click yes. However, the field sex, the feature sex of the client, of the patient, excuse me, is important for us as well, at least it's of interest, right? For us to begin our exploratory data analysis. So I'm going to want to say no to all this, but just know that you can. Click next. Number of rows. Okay, minimum is 1,000. So we already have 1,000. I just want a lot more. So we want 100,000. We have 100,000 there. I could go up to a little bit over 2 million. Oh my gosh, 2 billion. That's a lot. And of course, we have a goodness of fit criteria. We could do a Kolmogorov Smirnov or Anderson Darling. I'm actually just going to go with the first one here. We're going to name our file heart underscore CSV. File output. There's a few different ones that we could do. Many scientists like to work in the Parquet file. We're going to do just CSV just to make this simple for us. Next. All right, it's giving us a review of all the selections we've made. We can go back there and edit any one of these from here, but we're going to go ahead and hit save and run. Save and run. So from here, it's just a waiting game, right? If you have 20, 30, 100,000 rows to begin with, and you're looking to get 2 million or a little bit over 2 billion, actually, that's the number that was there, it's going to take a bit. But we are not. We're looking to get just a few and, well, 100,000 to be exact. Now, this is the flow here from our synthetic data that we're working on. And our flow chart here allows us to import. Then we're going to be mimicking that data. Of course, then we're going to be generating it and then exporting it. So the great thing here is that we're not anonymizing anything, but we definitely want to export. And that's our path. And of course, we could go ahead and enlarge this, move it around. If you want to do anonymize, we could click on anonymize and then throw it right before the mimic. But what we're going to be doing is running the selection. So we're going to be exporting it. Let's go and hit play to run everything. So we got notified there that our execution was successfully created. But now let's go ahead and look at the data. So we could go back to our breadcrumb up here and go back into Adrian's sandbox. And we're going to be looking at the assets. Now, this is interesting. So you see how we have the heart disease new, but this is actually a synthetic data flow. So I could go in here and I could rename it. Well, I think I have to click on it and then rename it. So I could go ahead and click on this to see our data flow that we created just right now. Reminder, we did the more automated version, but it also created the heart_output CSV file, which is really neat. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on this to view it here. I want you to pay close attention to the asset detail. Here we have 7 megabyte file. Right now, don't be misled by up here where we have a preview count of 12 columns, which is what we had. Obviously, we have 1,000 rows. We are only seeing the first 1,000 rows of this data. But that's the only thing we're seeing. We're only seeing the first 1,000 rows. But we do have 100,000. As a reminder, we started with like a 30K file. Now we're at a 7 meg file. So let's go ahead and go back to the first file. The heart disease. So let's click on heart disease. 35K. So, and here we see we have 918 rows. Now the other one we have 100,000. So let's go back to the other one, just see a bit here. Clicked on the Adrian sandbox. Let's go and click on the output again. All right. There we go. Now we'll let you all go at leisure and play with this on your own. But we do have now 100,000 rows, which is something that is probably super helpful. You don't need to have 998 or 1,000 rows. You could have less rows or less data, right? 10, 20 rows of data, and it'll synthesize 100,000 rows for us. That way we could go ahead and use a potential client's small data set that they'll provide for us and create this synthetic data that allow us to prove out a concept or an MVP on their premises, perhaps on a cloud environment as well. So if they're not allowed to share their data with you, they could give you a small set. And from that small set, we could go ahead and create the synthetic data, and then we'll be utilizing this synthetic data to prove out an MVP or a proof of concept. And that pretty much is it, you all. It's super easy to use, not challenging at all. Future tutorials or trainings on this will be provided. And for the next one, we'll actually create a flow from scratch as opposed to creating the automated one. For now, that's it. Thank you so much, and everybody have a great one.